Hey, everybody, welcome to Contest Prep University. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. We had a really good question come up in our D1 club this week, and I thought it would be a great topic to address today. And it is, why do we not ascribe to a super compensation effect for glycogen? So, one of these members in our Contest Prep University D1 club obviously understands that we don't talk positively about that, Adam. And so she said, I know you probably talked about this a million times, but is it because of the risk of spillover? Is it because you lose some predictability? And I would say those are definitely parts of it, but kind of a core constituent part for me is going back to when these theories were proposed. It was for performance sport, and it was for the theory, the hypothesis that somebody could pack more glycogen into muscle tissue to then be able to run longer distances and so forth, and basically just fill the tank with more energy, fill your body with more usable energy. So there's a couple reasons. First of all, that's not even a great idea for those kind of performance sports. I have worked with marathon runners and distance runners and even Olympic athletes. And, these kind of ideas still circulate there, even down to the old, like, high school football team training table, where the night before the game, everybody eats 4 plates full of pasta and you're going to have a much better game, right? Well, we know you're obviously going to assimilate some of those carbs into muscle glycogen. Takes about 8 to 12 hours to start, and 24 to 48 hours is wrapping up to get full assimilation. And since every gram of stored glycogen in your body holds 3 times its weight in water, the cost of having some extra glycogen is you're going to weigh 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 pounds heavier with just a sloggy amount of water in your body. So just the quote peaking process for even a marathon runner to say on game day, instead of not relying on quote super compensation or even carb loading, let's make sure you have a normal usable amount of glycogen. And then guess what you get on the road? You get little cups of Gatorade, or you have your Goo Gone packets, or you have your other electrolyte drinks. So you don't need that super compensation. The other part is, it's kind of a fallacy. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. So you can totally deplete your body, 2, 3 days. I still see coaches doing this, Adam. I know you do. Lots of high volume training to get rid of glycogen in the muscle tissue. And then you're just eating 0 grams of carbs. So you're not replenishing it, on the hope that 2 or 3 days later, when you restore carbs, you can super compensate and maybe hold up to 30% more glycogen than you would normally. Show me where that's even proven physiologically. Show me that you don't just go up to normal glycogen levels, which you could have just kept them there. But in the process, you've gone through that very catabolic, soul crushing 2 or 3 days of carb depletion. And now absolutely you're making it unpredictable with spillover and so forth. So that's me setting the table for why, as a base foundational hypothesis, I don't think it's helpful. I think it does create a lot of predictability issues, consistency issues. But what am I missing, Adam? What are other reasons why we might not do this, or maybe we would use it as a tool for some people?
Yeah, so one of the main reasons we don't do that, it's always like I've always described it as the half court shot or maybe even a full court shot at the buzzer in this case. So, when you're working with athletes and you had mentioned all the stuff about running, this is based on how you look. So, one, it's subjective, so that's kind of difficult. But one of the reasons we don't do this is, you're really banking on Thursday night loading at best to be your final look. And one of the reasons we don't do this, it's really hard to see, what your client's capable of in maximal glycogen storage in the first place. We see it all the time where, we're prepping somebody and let's say they're in bikini and their glutes aren't quite tight enough. They need just a little bit more, tightness. You can gamble on peaking them early and hope that they get a lot of glycogen storage in the glutes, and that might be enough to make them tight enough. But one of my, favorite coaches in the industry, Cliff Wilson, said something a long time ago that really stuck with me. And he said, I want to see the person where they are before I ever start raising food again. And he said, you take a lot less gambles on that because you're kind of hoping at that point the glutes fill out to be tight enough. And that was something that really helped correct my coaching back in the day. I forget when he said that, but I definitely took that as a strong fact when he had listed that. And, it's really, well, funny enough, he's someone who kind of does the backload on occasion, but, it really is a gamble. And when you're trying to break into that top five at a national show, you don't have that much room for error. It's best to see the client, see how they're responding over the course of days versus a single day. And this is why we call it peak week and not peak day. So I'm always huge on kind of discussing these things with my clients. Actually, a perfect example. And I think 5 years ago, had my client asked me this, which is the better show? I could compete 1 week out from Universe and then go right into Universe, or I could compete 2 weeks before Universe. Well, this client needs to be tighter. And I thought, well, it would be silly to load you to then be fully loaded, deplete you back that down, and then go back up again. I said definitely compete the week before. As long as you can arrange the travel, let's deplete down, peak for that first week, and then use what we have from that first peak week, remain relatively stable, and go into the next show, quite possibly being better. So anytime you're, loading and then dropping and then you know, replenishing, it definitely changes things. And it's best to when you first load somebody, you may say, "Hey, I think I've got a little bit more that I can give you." If you're just throwing it all in at the buzzer, you don't really have much room to correct. You're just really, once that ball has left the hand, you can do some show day management, but you're really banking off of all that momentum that you threw in the day before. And that's kind of a hard ride to hang on to.
Well, and it's a perfect metaphor because what are the percentages of making that shot, right? And it generally you're going to take that shot because you're down and you're looking for the win. And that's just the antithesis of consistent, predictable moves toward looking your best. So you rightly made that shift from the fact that this super compensation hypothesis was from a performance sport, specifically running, and we're not runners. You're judged by how you look on the stage. And the reason I said show me that that's even effective is it's just not a highly studied reproducible thing to look at super compensation and if it lasts, because in physique sport it's not we have this run and you're going to super compensate, and hold that hold that glycogen in your muscle tissue. You're still living, you're still moving, you're still breathing, you're eating and sleeping. And so over the course of those couple of days that you are replenishing glucose, hoping it gets assimilated into glycogen, there has to be some spillover. So you're hoping you've timed that right. And even if you get any compensatory super physiological effect, By contest day, it's probably already gone because you're moving around using glycogen. You're not loading again and again and again. You've got that one shot. So if you have not used a linear or progressive linear load, you're missing out on how consistent and predictable you can fine tune yourself to that point. Right before we started recording this, Adam, I had a video chat with a client of mine getting ready for a photo shoot. And to tell him, like I do my competitors, you gotta look your best on stage the first time. You gotta look just as good or better or just your best for the second time you're on stage, a second division. Then you've got awards or finals. This could be hours apart, it could be minutes apart, it could be a day apart. Um, just like this client's photo shoot, I want you to look great at the beginning of the hour and the end of the hour. We've got 60 minutes. And if we're having to suffer through spillover and things like that, and we've, quote, missed the peak, what a waste, man. What a waste. But if we can get you to the point where you look your best, you've got that perfect balance between tightness and fullness, and we just have to maintain that with hydration, minerals, electrolytes, a little carb when we need it, half a meal when we need it. That's the win. And that's where you and I are always looking for that 100% mark with our clients, knowing we have to play from 95, 96, 97%. Because as soon as you get irreconcilably spilled over, it's just done. That show is a waste. So maybe speak to that a little bit with going back to how you are getting that person, you know their best look, you know how they can look. So here's how we're setting up peak week. And if we're not going to use a carb depletion and hypothetical supercompensation, how are we making sure we at least have the right amount of glycogen at the right time?
Yeah. So our process is we do photos 3 times a day. So morning, midday, night. Morning, hopefully being the tightest. Nighttime, hopefully being the fullest, with still being relatively tight. And then for the biggest part of this is, basing your macronutrient changes off of those photos. So I'm glad you asked this question because as you were speaking, if I'm a beginner coach, I'm listening to this, it's going to be a complicated topic because they may not have developed their eye. And I have been so lucky that I've had so many people work with me that I've really gotten the chance to fine tune my process over the years. Another benefit, I've always gotten to be able to reach out to you for help. And not only did that help develop my eye, but it helped give me the confidence to learn multiple different ways to do this and do this in different scenarios. You've bailed me out a couple times where I've done things wrong, like way back in the day, and I miss much less now. And so it is visual, and I think that's the biggest thing. It can be very hard to teach this, but it does come with years of experience. But once someone goes over too much and you have to really deplete, I think the one thing people forget is, well, you don't just lose that subcutaneous glycogen, the spillover that you want to get rid of. You also lose the glycogen in the muscle tissue. Now, I'm not saying if I move someone's carbs back 40 grams or so after they've already came back to manage the peak a little bit better. Um, maybe they got too full at night and we didn't see the tightness that we usually see in the morning. We're just managing. But if you really overshoot, it can take days to recover from that. And again, when you pull back really hard, you lose the glycogen, you're starting that peak week process almost all over again, depending on how much you had to deplete out to get tight again. So I think that's the biggest way I could explain this to our newer coaches out there. Um, yeah, I think that even to this day, I see different things with different clients, and that's what's been so fun about the artistic side of this. And it's really easy, especially in your beginning years, when you do something that works for a client, you want to do that to all of your other clients. And that's not always the case. And this is where peak week and the 3 times a day photos will really guide you. And it's okay to change your peak week plan. It's worse to just stick with your plan because you have an ego and say, oh, I want it to be so perfect. The point of the peak week is to kind of put the clubs in the bag and then pull the right clubs as you need. Oh, you know what? I was a little bit too high on carbs this day. Let's pull it back just a little bit. Let's add a little bit of salt here. Let's see how we look with a little bit more water in the muscle tissue. Maybe let's pull salt back some. And or what did your last meal look like? Why do you look so much better? Oftentimes, that might be the meal that they had a lot of salt in it. So you can really pick up on small things other than just even the protein, carbs, and fats.
You are destined to be a caddy in the PGA. The golf metaphors. I was about ready to interrupt you and say, yes, you might need that lob wedge instead of the pitching wedge. But to your point, I think the reason this kind of question is still on the minds of people, and the reason it's so attractive is we want that half court shot, right? It's amazing when it goes in. Like, here's how I've looked for 3 or 4 months dieting. Here's how I've looked all week. If I can just wake up and look 10 times better, it's going to be amazing. Isn't that what peaking is supposed to be? Isn't that how my coach is supposed to handle this? And it's just not. It's a fallacy. 99.9% of people wake up disappointed and they don't look their best. It's that battle cry, that lament of the next day after the contest where people are like, gosh, why did I look like this? Look, I just ate half a pizza and a 2 liter of Dr. Pepper, and now I look better. And one point is, first of all, you may look at yourself, you look at your vascularity in your forearms, or you look at yourself for 1 minute of that day and you look pretty good. Maybe 2 hours later, you look horrible because you're really spilled over. So that's not exactly a scientific approach. But when you can get to that point where you are linearly fine tuning and progressing your way up, and you can start that morning, as you said, with the daily process photos of peak week for your clients. You're going to look tightest in the morning because you've been horizontal, you've been exhaling, fluid all night long in your respiration. You've been fasting for hours through the night as you slept. And so, yes, you're flat. That's part of being flat, but you're tight. Now you're vertical, you're walking around, fluid is leaking out of your vascular system and pooling in your legs and so forth. And so you look a little bit softer, but by evening you've had a few meals. And so you're fuller. How do you strike that balance all day when you need it? It is not with super compensation. It is by not only, as you said, Adam, you can't compare yourself to another client, another person. You can't even compare yourself to yourself last year or yourself last week. The biology of this, the dynamic physiological processes are countless, almost infinite. And as one of my clients posted in social media a couple weeks ago, he's like, I've been doing this for 3 or so years with Joe. He's been my coach. And, we fine tune, we try these different things. He said, I think a good portion of how I look is actually just chance. And do you know how right he is? If you and I agree, Adam, that we can get somebody 95, 96, 97% of the way to their best, in the course of 3 years, they've competed in 10 contests. There will always be a contest where you were absolute best. There will be, let's call that 100%. There will be one that you were 95%. And that looks a far, way away from 100%. But managing and fine tuning and hour to hour, meal to meal on contest day is how we try to mitigate that chance and give everybody the opportunity to win. But the half court shot, the depletion, the super compensation, to me, that is the fastest way to not look your best.
Absolutely. I had a peak week um, a couple weeks ago where I had told the client, she didn't realize this, but I said, when we decided not to drop food when you were looking softer was the most important game day decision we made the entire peak week. Because I was close to dropping her food because she looked soft, but she had just came off another contest. She had traveled. And I said, I think we just need one more day to adapt to this. And she started looking a lot better. And I told her, I said, I don't know if you realize how paramount of a decision that was. And luckily, it was the right one. It could have been the wrong one. We could have gotten scared and drove things back. But the one reason I didn't do it, I knew I would have to deplete her to get the hardness back, and I knew I wouldn't have enough time to fill her up appropriately without a half court shot. And I said, I'm better off just maybe keeping things a little bit more moderate if I need to, but let's give it one more day and see how you look. We actually did increase her sodium a little bit, which pulled more of that glycogen into the muscle tissue. And that was all we needed to do. But I could have been wrong 100 times in
Right.
that scenario, But luckily, I had worked with this client for a while too, and that helps. Had she been the first time I worked with her, and obviously that was our third peak week, those other contests were invaluable for making that decision.
And that's exactly right. Because you're not just using a protocol that this is my recipe, this is how I do it with all of my clients all the time. You're also not just pulling a guess out of your ass. You're saying, I know your physique. We've done this before. We've been down this road. I'm seeing something here, but I have to trust what we've known about your history. And you're basing this on quote intuition, but that intuition is based on very intimate knowledge over time. That's a huge scientific, way to execute that decision. But let me wrap up by saying, here's when you might need this, and think of it like a continuum. I vehemently disagree that you need a complete and absolute depletion phase with a quote supercompensation. Disagree, throw it out. It's not useful. But just like we might progressively linearly load somebody into higher and higher and higher amounts of carbs, let's call that the midline, the top of the bell curve. Some people look better by progressively linearly depleting them. And I don't mean ultimate depletion, but if you're eating 250 grams of carbs and I decide, well, you really always look your best when you're slightly under, when you're a little bit depleted, and we know we're going to siphon off a couple pounds of water because glycogen levels are coming down systemically in all of your muscle tissue, and then we can have a small bump up the day before the show. That's not depletion. It's just getting them under that point of maintenance and then having a tiny load at the end. And a lot of people respond that way if they're prone to spillover. So that's kind of the undershooting. Now let's go to a rapid backload, still no depletion, but what if we do need a half court shot at the end? These are people who may be very, fast metabolically. They may need a lot of food, ectomorphs. They're already eating 3, 4, 500 grams of carbs a day. And we could risk them waking up on contest day being too thin, too light. And now we missed our shot because you cannot assimilate glycogen fast enough on contest day. Those are the kind of people that you may have to say, okay, maybe we do need an extra 500 calories, an extra 200 grams of carbs. And you were rolling the dice the day before the contest. But again, on a sense of scientifically validated, reproduced history, I know your metabolism can handle the food. I know it can. I don't want to get to 102% and spill over, but I also don't want to wake up at 85% and be irreparably flat. So I think this takes some history with a client, but I'll give you an example of mine. I had a female physique competitor, top drug-free competitor, and she was shredded. First time I've worked with her, and she carries a lot of size. I mean, she has the size and striated glutes. And we ran into a class where there were just much larger women. And even though she had the best conditioning, the judges awarded a couple of competitors ahead of her just on sheer size. So she was a person. Now that I have that history, I've had one contest season with her, one contest. We got to 97, 98% of the way there. Next time I would say we're going for it. Like we're going much higher because I know you could handle it. And so that may look like a very aggressive move. It may look like we're trying to go for a super compensation, but for her, it's just top level fullness. So within that spectrum, as a way to close this out, Adam, any thoughts on how you manage that process individually for each client?
Yeah, basically, when you have a client long enough where you're kind of seeing where they're falling in the mix, you might be able to say somebody looks better with a fuller look according to the judging criteria. Maybe they're leaner than everybody else, and you could sacrifice some conditioning to get somebody there. I have a I have a women's physique competitor, and she's absolutely peeled to the bone. I used to joke that she's Fizz Keeney, but really she's Fizz model because she just really has not much muscle size at all. So with her, we peak her for a lot more fullness just because there's no one even close to her conditioning. Now, the one thing we have to watch with her that I would say is a major slight super compensation, but it's just really the icing on the cake is keeping her food low on show day. Even though she eats so much the day before, we really struggle to keep her midsection down when we eat that much. So, changing food sources the day before to be a little bit less volume, and then keeping show day food even lower than how she would eat in a normal week, or even like a quarter of that. Just a little bit goes a long way to her waist, especially as the day goes. So we get some challenges where she has some later appearances here and there, and that's really difficult to manage, but she always does really well.
Yep. Awesome. And I don't want to over summarize and repeat everything we've talked about. I think we've given enough information here. I am going to say, especially for our D1 club member who asked this question, we're going to produce this, give it to that group first, have some dialogue before this is ever public. And it's one of the benefits of the D1 club. So anybody here listening, we do have a little bit of a fight club kind of process to this. We don't just give you a link and say, go sign up and you're in. It's a $3 a month paywall. I think pretty reasonable. It's not to replace coaching, but coaches like Austin Kiergaard, our dietetics director, myself, Adam, our medical director, are all in there, peer-to-peer conversation. We're facilitating good discussions. So it's a great place if you don't have a coach, or if you have a coach, but you want a second set of eyes to participate. But message me and we'll just make sure you're a right fit. I'll give you that link. But again, the Contest Prep University D1 Club, it's a place just for a community like the good old fashioned forums of yesteryear, where you can get some great support from a community of people who are like-minded and want to see your best foot forward on stage. So we'll see you guys next time in Contest Prep University. Adam, thank you so much. And we'll see you also in the D1 Club.